on physical pain, pain that can be pointed to, that has edges, that buzzes in the limb or burns in the muscle or rings like a cruel bell inside the bone. I'm talking now about the body's kind of pain, physical pain, the kind that makes us moan without permission, makes us crawl when we used to walk, makes us say things we wouldn't say and forget things we thought we'd remember. The pain that knocks the air out of your lungs and leaves you asking yourself, will this ever stop? I have known this kind of pain, and the first thing I will tell you about it, before philosophy, before poetry, is that physical pain makes an animal of you. It doesn't care about your job title or your poetry collection. It rips through abstractions. It empties out the metaphors and leaves only the pulse, the throb, the cry. It drops you out of narrative and back into the primal. And yet, I believe it's worth thinking through, deeply. Not to transcend it, not to escape it, but to behold it clearly and perhaps find in it not meaning, but location. For pain locates us. More accurately than any map, it tells us where we are. It is, in its brutal way, the most honest companion the body knows. 1. The body as battlefield. When the body turns on itself, or rather, when the world's entropy finally reaches the gates of the body, we feel it first not as death, but as pain. The inflammation of the joint, the migraine in the temple, the rib cracked on the steering wheel, the sudden shock of metal against skin. Pain is not a symptom of death. It is proof of life fighting back. This is the paradox. The more alive the tissue, the more it can hurt. Dead flesh does not cry out. It's the living part of us that suffers. And so when I speak of physical pain, I am not only speaking of suffering, I am also speaking of vitality. Let me tell you a short story. I once broke 3 ribs slipping on a patch of ice behind a bait shop in East Kentucky. There was no one around, my phone was dead, and the cold wind laughed at my whimper. For several hours I lay there making shallow breath the way a man might sip tea through a straw. The ribs stabbed me with every breath, and I'll never forget what I thought in that moment. This is what being alive costs. This is the price. Pain had stripped me down, it had abolished my plans, erased my to-do list, humiliated my posture, and made a child of me again. And yet it also returned me to something essential, my breath, my body, my limits, my finitude. Pain brings us back to the edge of things. It reminds us that we are not infinite, we are not theory, we are flesh. And flesh remembers. 2. Memory in the flesh. Pain has a memory. Even after it goes, it leaves residue behind. You bend a certain way and your shoulder flinches, not from pain now, but from the memory of pain then. The body has learned. It does not forget. And some of us are haunted not by a pain that persists, but by one that once was. The memory is worse, in some ways, because it arrives without explanation. The back seizes, the leg shakes, the jaw tightens, all from a moment long past, yet somehow still present. There are people who live in bodies like mine. I call them the memory keepers. We are the ones who, on cold mornings, feel old breaks return. We know the weather in our joints before it arrives. We limp not from the fresh wound, but from the echo. And these echoes speak. They say, be careful. You remember what happened last time. This is one of the cruel ironies of physical pain. It doesn't just hurt, it teaches. And what it teaches, we sometimes wish we could unlearn. But the body is wise even when it is cruel. It does not forget the furnace, it does not forget the blade, it does not forget the burn. And for that we remain tethered to our history, even those parts we would rather leave behind. 3. The intelligence of pain. Do you know how smart pain is? I don't mean it has a brain, I mean it has a logic. It's a signal, of course, yes, we've all heard that. But beyond the clinical definitions, there is something profoundly elegant about how pain shows up. Think about a paper cut, tiny, silly, nothing serious. But it sings louder than 1,000 bruises. Why? Because the fingertips matter. Because evolution has decided that these places, hands, feet, face, must be protected with higher priority. So the pain is louder there. And what about deep pain? The kind in the lower back, or in the internal organs? That dull, slow burn, like a warning light left blinking. That pain doesn't scream. It whispers over weeks, but it wears you down. And then there's nerve pain. Ah, now we reach the highest riddle. The nerves lie. They send pain where there is no wound. The leg burns though the spine is the culprit. The hand stings though the surgery was on the neck. Nerve pain is the ghost in the machine. And in that ghostliness we encounter something deeper. Pain is not always where we think it is. Just like guilt. Just like shame. Just like love. Sometimes pain shows up in one place only to point us toward another. 4. The solitude of suffering. Let us be honest. Physical pain isolates. You may have the best caregivers, the kindest friends, the finest nurses. But when your body is screaming, no one else can hear it the way you do. No one else feels it as you. You are alone in that experience. This is not necessarily a tragic statement. It is simply the truth. Pain puts a wall around us. And inside that wall, we either go mad or we meet ourselves. I remember lying in a hospital bed after a minor surgery went wrong, a nicked nerve, a cascade of complications. The days were blurred with injections, the nights lit by the green glow of monitors. But what I remember most was not the pain. It was the isolation of pain. You cannot share it. You can describe it. You can gesture toward it. You can scream. You can cry. But the pain remains yours. And this teaches you something severe and sobering, that you are not entirely available to others, that there is a part of you, your pain, that will remain untranslated no matter how fluent the listener. To hurt is to be removed, even if only by inches. 5. The temptation of resentment. Physical pain prolonged gives rise to a particular danger, bitterness. You begin to resent those who move freely. You resent the ease of others' bodies, the man jogging by, the child skipping stairs, the woman who bends without bracing. You resent their freedom because it reminds you of your prison. And this is where pain begins to moralize. It begins to whisper things to you, dangerous things. It says, they don't know what it's like, they don't understand, they're soft, they're stupid, they're ungrateful. And if you let it, pain can make you cruel. This is the dark side of suffering. When pain is not metabolized, when it is not given language or held in community, it turns inward and becomes poison. And so part of the work for those of us who live in ongoing pain is to guard against this bitter turn, to refuse the impulse to become the victim who punishes, to insist on empathy even when none is shown to us. The wounded can become healers, or the wounded can become weapons. And the difference is how we carry the wound. 6. The quiet heroism of endurance. I have sat across from people, some of them near strangers, who live in states of pain I cannot imagine, neuropathy, terminal illness, autoimmune storms, old war injuries, spinal disorders that leave them in near constant distress. And I'll tell you this, they are among the most quietly heroic people I've ever known. Not because they've overcome the pain, but because they go on anyway. They joke, they cook, they read, they show up. They are not fighters in the Hollywood sense, they are not crusading or triumphant, they are simply enduring. And that, to me, is sacred. Endurance is holy, not flashy, not glamorous, but holy. When a person wakes up in pain and still says yes to the day, they are committing a profound act of resistance, and I have learned from them. They do not need pity, they do not need motivation posters, they need companionship, and they need rest, because the work of enduring pain is invisible. It costs more than we know. 7. When the body breaks. There is a moment, those who have known serious injury or illness know it, when the body simply gives out. A knee buckles, a disc slips, a heart stops. In that moment we are no longer in control. And that perhaps is the real terror behind physical pain. It shows us how little we were ever in charge. Pain reminds us that we are not machines, that we are not gods, that the body, for all its glory, is a fragile scaffolding over a trembling self. And yet, there is something beautiful in this too, because when the body breaks and you find yourself in the hands of others, carried, lifted, bandaged, held, you learn something you couldn't learn otherwise, that to be human is to be helpless sometimes, and that helplessness is not the end of dignity, it is the beginning of mercy. 8. The grace of touch. Let me end with something gentle. For all the pain the body feels, it is also through the body that healing comes. A hand on the shoulder, a nurse's warm compress, a lover's kiss on a bandaged brow, the cool cloth, the whispered hush, the stillness of another person breathing near you. Touch can't fix everything, but sometimes it can fix something, and that something may be the difference between despair and endurance. Pain makes us flinch, but tenderness teaches us to stay. Final notes from the broken-backed man. So here I am, still limping some mornings, still cautious with stairs, still reaching for the heating pad more than I'd like to admit, but I am alive. And pain, though cruel, has given me back certain truths I might have otherwise lost, that the body is holy even when it breaks, that to hurt is not to fail, that to be carried is not to be weak, that suffering rightly held can shape us toward kindness. If you're in pain, real, unrelenting physical pain, I won't offer you platitudes. I won't say it's for a reason. I will only say this: you are not invisible, you are not less, you are not alone. I see you, I feel you, I walk beside you, even if only with a limp.